Two. Did you check your two? One, two. Hello, 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 hello. Mic check one, two, two, two. One, two. Two. Huh? Yeah. Sure. On the group. Yeah.
You had us stressed there for a moment.
Yeah, no, just getting here. Hello.
We were both stressing out.
Hey, John.
Hello, I haven't seen you for a while.
It's been a long time. How are you doing? Good. This is. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
you
your
might
presentation.
load your presentation.
Yeah,
Yeah. This is Ayubu from TNC Tanzania.
Hello, Yubu.
Hi, how are
Nice
you?
to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Hi.
Ayubu John Bolt.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
We met earlier.
load it up on there. I'll introduce you and then
Okay,
you'll
yeah.
take it away.
Should
Okay, we're
I-
good.
You've got a game plan, dude. You have to run with the game plan here.
You know the question.
No, I don't.
Well, I was supposed to be this week at the International Seaweed Symposium in Tasmania. I couldn't afford giving a talk about African seaweed aquaculture. I should have written it anyway. I didn't.
Have you printed something else?
Licking your ass so bad.
Up until 10 minutes ago, I've been working 2 days straight on one document.
And when you see me, oh, I might be a little bit late. I'm like, don't do it.
I was here. At least I was here.
Oh, okay.
But I've been sitting in the back working on the document. And I just sent it off.
that.
It's already on now.
Lovely to meet you.
You too. Are you going to be speaking up here this morning?
I was asked to speak by Maria, but
Okay.
I'm just here to represent the ASC, so I don't have to.
Let's see how we need to know how to fit it in.
Okay.
What
Otherwise, I'm sure that it's actually not important. Really? But I don't, all I am is I'm an agriculture ASC representative. But I don't have a lot to say other than we're here to help support farmers in seaweed, but I'm not a huge expert in this. So in philanthropy, fundraising, and supporting, it's almost like improvement space. And I will be focusing on applications.
part of what we're going to try to integrate in the conversation is lessons from other geographies, right?
Okay.
So we'll have a presentation right off the bat from Tanzania. And I know there are other people we also have TNC, we have operations in other geographies. I don't think we'll spend too much time on those. But if you can, the idea is guidance be useful in figuring out how to do it.
So we have a joint stand in ASC and MSC. Starting out in the beginning to like follow sustainable.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, I don't have a loud voice, and even with a speaker, I compete for attention. So, and my children are not intimidated by me in the least. My name is Siham. I am from Ernst & Young. We are a major sponsor to the event, and for our sins, we get to facilitate these sessions. So I'm not a specialist in seaweed. All I know about them is they're in the ocean, and I try to swim where they are not, otherwise I get tangled up in them. But I guess you're all here because you strongly believe that sustainable seaweed has the potential to solve some of our most challenging sustainability challenges, global challenges. So I look very forward to assisting our chairperson and speakers today in facilitating the session. My job is really to make sure that you achieve whatever the goals are for this session, that nobody hogs the mic, and that we are able to get through the content today. So I'm just going to introduce some of our speakers before I take you through the program. It's quite a long one. I think we end at about 5:30 today. So there will be some breaks in between. There's a very nice area outside that you could just take a break if you want to. I don't think smoking is allowed, but I would expect none of you do. since you're all environmentally conscious. So I have with me here Sienna Crawford, and she's from the ASC. So, I mean, I think very many people have been wondering if she's real and if she she actually exists. So she's going to be just speaking to us in a few minutes. Adnan here is from TNC, and he's going to be kicking off the discussion, in fact, just giving us a national perspective. And then the state is going to be talking to us more about her specific project in Saldanha. Let's focus more on kelp in South Africa. We also have a presentation from Ayubi from TNC that will be kicking off. And then we have Professor Bolton here with us as well, and he's going to be sharing some words with the group as well. So I just want to very quickly talk to you about the agenda and the program that we have for today. So we are going to be kicking off with a very quick focus session on the value chain, and to really look at unpacking what that value chain, sustainable value chain for seaweed actually looks like. And then we're going to have an intermission, and later on we'll be talking about value add. So making a very clear distinction between value chain and value add, and what the challenges are for value chain versus the challenges for value add, and how we unpack that. So I think it's going to be, pretty much a let's see where the conversation goes. We don't know who everyone in the room is. You each might have specific perspectives, reasons for being here, things that you want to have discussed. So I would encourage you to raise that. We're a small group. I think we can manage the conversation quite well. But yeah, so focus is on value chain and value add and unpacking that. So I'm going to actually hand over to Adnan to kick off.
Good morning, or good afternoon now. So I think, thanks, Siam, and I think the best way to move forward is somewhat organically, and let the conversation grow as it goes. We've got a few questions and ideas for how to frame it. Let me start by quickly introducing myself, and I think each of us up here will do so. And also recognizing that there are several people who were asked and invited to be here today as experts that are in the audience. So we're looking forward to your contribution. And instead of going around the room and getting introductions from everybody, I think let's just introduce yourself when you first speak today. So my name's Adnan Awad. I'm the Director for the Ocean Strategy for Africa for the Nature Conservancy. I'm based here in Cape Town. I've lived here for 24 years and worked for a few different international organizations on oceans. And I'm not an expert in aquaculture, not at all. But at the same time, we're growing a program for South Africa, as we are for several countries around Africa at the moment. And TNC has expertise internationally in aquaculture, and this is actually increasingly an important part of the work we're doing for coastal communities. So we do have Ayubu, who will be presenting momentarily for a few minutes on some of that work, just to help frame our conversation today. Largely what we're going to be looking at is how to provide guardrails and guidance towards a program in South Africa. Could be considered a program, it could be considered the growth of a value chain around seaweed aquaculture. And how that can learn from the lessons of other geographies, but also what are some of the unknowns at this point. So we want to unpack a lot of those unknowns today. We're not going to try to solve all of the issues and challenges around this, but if we can identify the bulk of those challenges, I think we'll be ahead of the game. Certainly we want to glean as much as we can from the expertise in the room, and I know there are people from East Africa and other geographies that can help contribute there, and people who know the challenges on the ground here in South Africa with respect to working with communities, with respect to government-led initiatives. So, really getting some of that real tangible quality to the conversation will be useful, but feel free to put up your hand at any point and have a contribution that does help advance the overall dialogue. We are going to be focusing in the first half of the session on what we mean by value chains and what are the steps to establishing this for a seaweed aquaculture largely kelp focused for what would mostly be South and West Coast South Africa. Now, knowing the challenges here, there are other forms of aquaculture being considered, and we don't need to necessarily exclude those, especially where there are some cross-cutting lessons. And similarly, there are some of those lessons that come from other species being cultivated in other parts of the world that may or may not be seaweeds themselves, and we're quite open to diving into that information. And given that this is the Africa Ocean Innovation Summit, I think we shouldn't only be focused on South Africa. So insofar as we can capture some recommendations, some opportunities for other Southern and African programs and interests, let's be open to that as well. So I think that's enough for me to kick off and frame this. In a moment, I'll ask Ayub to give his slides in a presentation, but let's first have introductions from the panelists up here.
Do you not want him to do first?
No, let's each introduce and then
Okay, so my name is Lizette Boertes. I've been in the aquaculture industry for many years, and now currently I am the program manager or the project manager for the South African kelp farming project that we are executing. It's actually a feasibility study. In fact, there's two components. So already we've done a pre-feasibility study, which John will in a moment explain a little bit more about. And currently we are doing a feasibility study of growing kelp. So it's kelp farming in Saldanha Bay. And it will run for the next 30 months and maybe another 2 years or so. And it's very much still in the beginning stages. We have literally only kicked off in November, December. So while we are focusing on kelp specifically and in South Africa, Saldanha Bay specifically, as Adnan said, I mean, the audience is from a wider geographic distribution, and that doesn't mean that we have to focus on South Africa per se. But there is a common thread here, and that is that we do want to look at the value chain with a little bit of focus after the break on a value addition. After Ayubus is going to do his presentation, then we will just ask John Bolton, who was involved with and is involved with our project still. Oh, yeah. Okay, so, and maybe I should just also mention that this workshop shouldn't be seen as the only one and only workshop where you will have an opportunity to unpack this. It's actually part of a series of workshops. We've already done one a week or so ago, knowing that we would have this one, and then there's another one next week, which will have very similar objectives, but focused in that case on kelp, specifically on our project. And then next year we will have another workshop which will focus on a different component, and we hope to have a roadmap at the end so that we can unpack it as we go over the next 2 years and not rush it down in one workshop.
Okay, great, thank you. So hi, I'm Sienna Crawford. I'm the first Aquaculture Stewardship Council representative for Africa. And I guess my role, I'm the director of partnerships. So I really wanted to make the ASC more accessible in Africa and start creating networks so that the sort of seaweed and aquaculture industry within Africa can start in that value chain, as you said. So what I'm really focused on is the environmental sustainability of projects that are starting sort of in the early stages. So we're doing big aquaculture improvement projects that we've started a pilot program in Indonesia, and we're at the end of that pilot program, so I could talk about what we've done in Indonesia, and I'm starting to look at what we could do in Africa in aquaculture and specifically seaweed projects, and then help on the pathway to sustainability and certification.
Okay. So then just very quickly to summarize, I think for the group here today, I think our outcomes would really be to identify challenges and unknowns that this group would need to take forward and to establish a process that is inclusive and encourages participation from all of the stakeholders. What is that process? How do we take this forward? How do we research the unknowns? Through a series of workshops, not necessarily a work group, but a process that is inclusive and participative. I think if we can establish that as the objective, then for today's session, we can check ourselves through the remainder of the session. Okay, so then I think I'm going to hand over to Ayubu.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name is Ayubu Mishari Singole. I'm from the Nature Conservancy. We work worldwide, but focus is Western Ocean because I'm from the African region. So we're going to talk about aquaculture. It's a diverse word, but particularly going to focus on the seaweed farming. But the Nature Conservancy is a conservation organization. It's a worldwide organization. It's like number one. And our aquaculture is based on restorative. Now, so we're going to talk about aquaculture, but we're going to dive in restorative aquaculture. Yeah, I'd like you to, this is outline. Normally when we're meeting outside, we want people to know about our mission as TNC. So we have the mission is to conserve the lands and the waters on which all life depends, because we cannot survive without water and the lands. And we know agriculture depends on water. So we need to make sure the water is available throughout the agriculture system. The vision is the world where the diversity of life thrives and people conserve nature for its own sake and So there's 20 million gallons of water which have been purified by doing restorative aquaculture. But also, the fish abundance. In 1 year, there is 5 tons of fish increased because when we're doing restorative aquaculture, seaweed in particular, and other kind of restorative aquaculture, we create habitat. We create great food for the species like fish and arthropods, many other aquatic species which are found in the marine environment. So we're doing this in a way that's supposed to be done. We increase the supply of fish in our water. So by removal of carbon dioxide in water, we reduce the ocean acidification. So the restorative aquaculture is very important when it comes to our goal as TNC. We're not just doing aquaculture, but we're doing restorative aquaculture. Yeah, these are the environmental benefits. You could see the percentage. The cost of protection is 1%. Acid acidification regulation 30%. Water quality. So because we are doing aquaculture. Carbon sequestration. The issue of carbon credit. They say the amount of carbon absorbing ability for the aquatic organism, which is a seaweed, mangrove, and other, to the plants. So you see how important it's seaweed farming and aquaculture in general. There's habitat provision, 20%, livelihood improvement. So when we were doing aquaculture in a restorative way, these practitioners will get it to improve their life by selling whatever is produced in a restorative way by 25%. But nutrient removal, this is very important because people don't invest money to do the physical remove, but the environment will do it by itself. Yeah, where we work as TNC. TNC, we work in Asia, in Indonesia, in the Caribbean, in the US, in America, in Palau, in Belize, in Tanzania, particularly in Zanzibar. So as the map shows, that's how we work. You see, these are a kind of species. There's oyster, seaweed, there are fish, there are shrimp. There are many different of species that are being cultured in aquaculture in the area we work. But for the case of this presentation, we're going to focus in Zanzibar. Yeah, seaweed in Zanzibar. Seaweed in Zanzibar, it was brought in late 70s. There was a research if it could be done. So they introduced in about 70s, going to 80s, that's where it started. Then Zanzibar, many people know it's an archipelago. It's an island. Zanzibar, you're talking of Unguja Island and Pemba Island. That's where the main aquaculture produces seaweed. A slide shows is 2,400 square meters of the area. It's not a big area. Population, according to 2022 census, last year we had a census in Tanzania, and they're approaching 2 million inhabitants in Zanzibar. And the production is almost 25,000, but mostly the women are doing it. 80% are women are doing seaweed farming. And the main species is Spinosaurus and Cotonou. And seaweed export in Zanzibar, it makes the third after tourism and other crop farming, like crops. You know, Zanzibar is the spice island. So seaweed makes a 30% contribution to the GDP of the country. But the government now is in the plan to organize more seaweed farmers to produce about 30 tons per year so that they can do the value chain. The main topic for these workshops is about value chain. That they want them to process the seaweed into many different products. Yeah, this is the map of Zanzibar and Pangani. This is the reference side is the mainland Tanzania, the Pangani district, where there are many seaweed farmers. And that side, that's Pemba, and this is Unguja. So this is the area where seaweed farmers are found in Tanzania. Yeah, we are working with partnership because as TNC, we cannot be anywhere, everywhere. Our staff, they're not that many, so we work in the partnership with partners. Our first partner is our farmers. There are research organizations like universities, academicians, there are governments. That's the main partner because in order for the project to be sustainable, we need to work with governments. There are seaweed industry. There are business people who are exporting seaweed, raw seaweed, but there are these processors, the international ones, and the local ones. Yeah, so this is the project area where we work. There's a village called Tumbe Village. There's Kikuyu, Mbuyuni, Shumba, Gando, Fundo Island, Kuku Village, Bunguni, and five other villages. This one are the Zanzibar Island. The 5 villages called Pambwebo, Sefemwei, those are from the Tanzania mainland Pangani district. So this is the main area where seaweed is being practiced in Tanzania. But now, in the coming year, we're expecting to expand in more villages. Yeah, we did a lot of trainings because we found there's a lot of challenge in the seaweed farming. So we had some trainers who trained our farmers in the prevention of disease, maintenance of seaweed farming, seaweed farm operations, because sometimes some fishers are trying to invade in the seaweed farms. So we need to train them on how to prepare their farms well, on how to avoid these invaders who are going to destruct their farms. But how to source the seed, because if you don't prepare your seed well, you cannot have a good results. But also the seaweed farm siting. You know, farm siting is very important because the issue of water pollution. You need to look where there's no interaction of human activities, so that you have a clear water, which is healthier for the seaweed to grow. The issues of farming tools, post-harvest care. How do you dry your seaweed? Because some people will just dry on the sand, but you need to train them how to use drying racks so to have a good quality. Because if you want to process seaweed into food products, it has to be not contaminated with worms, with bacteria. The issue of farm construction, transportation to markets, seaweed harvesting, seaweed harvesting. These are very important training that we've been conducting. But also, we had an opportunity to develop a manual, and we think this manual could be used not only in Tanzania or West Indian Ocean, but even in South Africa. It's a very useful manual that we had it's a guide that helps practitioners how to go about seaweed. Because there are many groups of people who can use this manual. It's a good guide. It guides on the foundation of the key players within the seaweed industry. But it helps you to improve the standing challenges, opportunities, and better management of practice for seaweed aquaculture in Tanzania and the West Indian Ocean region. But also it can be adopted in the region, but also in South Africa. So we have a guide in Tanzania, which is useful. Yeah, and we had to design different mode of trainings. There are in-class training like this. There are training team that we could develop, that we could work together with the buyers, because buyers, they know the quality of seaweed they want. So we had a different class of training with different stakeholders together. Then we had to put the design buyers. These are the names of the stakeholders who we're working in the Zanzibar. Cargill is the name of the seaweed buyers that they were directing the farmers on how the seaweed should be cultured so that it maintains the quality that they want. There are traditional-based seaweed farming practice. There's some traditional farmers, they know how to do it better. So those ones who do it better, they could train others in other villages. But also the issue of environmental conscious practice, more productive farming method, farmers mentoring and monitoring. There were farmers who were doing better, who would be used as example to other farmers. Those could be like exposure visits from this village to another village to train others so that they could do better. So those who are having the good methods, they could teach others as well. Yeah, we had some challenge as well. There are ecological challenge and socio-economic challenge. There was a use of mangrove sticks to use them in the seaweed farming, and which is also a challenge to environmental destruction, because mangrove, they are very important. As we all know, mangrove, it avoids soil erosion. So these are the challenge that we're facing with your cutting mangroves. Also, there was the issue of seagrass. Seagrass is one of the habitat in the marine. So there was interference of seaweed farming and seagrass. But also fish would come within the seaweed farmers, because when seaweed is grown, there is a lot of fish abundance. So the fishers will come and distract the ropes. So that's a big challenge. But also, we found that on the socio-economic challenge, there was the quality of seaweed due to lack of drying racks. Most of the farmers, they were drying the seaweed on the sand, on the beach sand, but also the processing value addition to sell finished seaweed products. Most of farmers were just selling dried seaweed at lower price. So we really now encourage on how to transform into a finished product that they could sell, add value, can have more money. But also, there's some buyers who will impose low prices, which would discourage many farmers to stop from having the seaweed farming, but also with some diseases, epiphytes. But some people will also steal seaweed from, because there's a time they know this season the buyer will come to buy. So some people will go, even they will harvest before the farmer themselves harvest. But also some people also, people are drying their seaweed, they come and steal because it's money. So this was another challenge. Can you help me? Yeah. Lesson learned. Yes. Yeah, we had some lesson learned from Tanzania, Zanzibar seaweed farming. We came to learn that mentorship works best when tailored to local needs. So we need to check on the needs that people have. You just don't do things that people don't need. Assessment training is very important. You need to identify what exactly the community need, so that it could be trained according to their needs. But also identifying champion or model farmers helps adoption of best management practice. In everything, there's a people who will do better than the others. So those ones are empowered, are given more training, extra training. They're the one going to teach others in the village in a cheaper way. Also training on awareness material to be in local language. Yeah, the Swahili language is the commonest language in Tanzania, in Zanzibar in particular, and East Africa now is growing even in Africa. So translating the training material in Swahili so that to target many people to understand. That was the lesson learned we had. Also considering the social culture aspect of the farmers. Yeah, most of the seaweed farmers in Tanzania, most Muslims. So when you are working with them, you have to go with their Muslim culture, the coastal culture. Sometimes during meetings, you need to make sure they don't mix up with men. And the way you have to arrange meeting, you have to be sure on Friday, they have to go to mosque. So all this issue of social culture is very important. When you call them on Friday, it means you are not respecting their religion. That's how they will interpret. So this is important to see their social cultural aspects so that you can go together with them. But also best management practice, example, double made rope. This was the technique adopted from Indonesia. Double made rope is a way you use the rope, you tie the rope together so that when you are tying your seaweed, you have more seaweed tied, seaweed seeds. So when it grows like 3 times from the single rope. So this is the technique that was adopted from Asia. It's called double made rope, adopted from Indonesia. Requires more time and skill to adopt, but yield thrice usual technique. So sometimes people tell them, can you use double? It's very expensive, the same thing. But when they see that if you apply this, the results are different, they will adopt. But also partnership with government is the key. Do anything in our region without government, because government are the one to expect to make things to continue. But also the broader scale up, the impact requires wider partnership. You cannot expand the scale without having more partners. The local organization like TNC is a big organization, but you have to work with local organizations, which also we go down to the localities where it can meet people easily. But also the issue of equity and gender, mainstreaming as the majority, the seaweed farming are women. Gender now is the way to go because we are dealing with more than 80% women. So this is the main lesson we learned, that we need to empower them. We need to allow them, they get leadership in these, in their groups, but in their organization, they make some unions, association. Women should be given an opportunity to take leadership, to take lead, because they are the majority in this industry of seaweed. But also, when you empower women, even the economy goes to the community, because when women get money from the seaweed, you could see the impact, because most of the culture in Africa, some men, when they grab money, they can go to drink, or they can share with the next women who's not involved in the seaweed farming business. Yeah, so it's very important that women are involved in leadership, in everything in the business, because they're the ones who are owning the industry. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ayubu. I don't know if there are any questions, but I just maybe want to share my thoughts on this. I think if we were to ask the question, what does an enabling environment look like, then the answer is it's localized. So while Tanzania shared some lessons learned for us, you could see that there was a lot of local context to it. And while I think the Seaweed Guide would provide useful insights to the experience of Tanzania, what success looks like is really localized. And I'm wondering whether maybe, despite the fact that we know how important aquaculture is and the benefits of seaweeds and how it would contribute to solving some of our biggest challenges, whether it's food security to the oceans itself, why we're not seeing greater adoption. And maybe that's something you'd want to explore later in the conversation. I certainly, as a novice, I'm very interested in that. I see we have a question at the back. Do you want the mic?
You
Want to introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Mr. Oscar. I'm from Kenya. You are asking a question. I hope he gets to answer first, or I continue with mine.
No, it's just a general insight to...
Okay. I actually have 3 questions for you, and 1 request, and a question too. Maybe let me start with you, yeah? Forgive me. Yeah. So my question to you, please, I'm sure I'd love to have contacts of everyone here. So maybe if we could have a list going around so that you can share contacts and maybe, network.
Okay.
if that's okay.
Yes, so we do have two scribes here that are taking some important notes, obviously just one here at the moment. And so maybe what we can do during the intermission is just let the sheet as it were just circulate it as Teams register of sorts. And then we can communicate it to all the participants today. That'd be great.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now, let me build up to my question. You said seaweed started in the 70s and 80s. Now, apparently, the people who started the seaweed farming in Zanzibar actually went training the same time. That is Kenya and Tanzania. But Tanzania, I think, were more proactive and started the seaweed farming. And it made them the greatest, the biggest seaweed farmers, suppliers in Africa. Now, my question is this. How do we get you to Kenya? Because we are seeing it's partners like you who may be helping develop that industry. We want to get Kenya to where Tanzania is. I was lucky to have gone to their seaweed day. They actually have a seaweed day. I don't know whether, you know, a seaweed day, and that's their 7th time having that. So on the invitation of Dr. Msuya, who's the Zanzibar Seaweed Cluster Initiative. Yes, and that is a model we actually want to develop in Kenya. I got people together. I will tell you my story maybe much later. So my first question is, how do we get you to Kenya? How do we get Nature Conservancy to Kenya? How do we get organizations to come and support us? My second question is, you talked about carbon credits. So I don't know whether seaweed has gotten to that point where there's a model of carbon credits. I know about mangroves and trees and all that, but I don't know about seaweed. My third question is, you talked about the conflict between seagrass and seaweed. Seagrass is actually very important, and just like seaweed is important. There are ways to get seaweed growing, a better quality seaweed, the cotonie, in the deeper waters, and there won't be that much conflict. And these are technologies that are yet to get to develop well. In Tanzania, they only have one spot. They had 2, one failed, I think one is happening. So how do you get these technologies to the region, including Kenya? Now, my fourth one, I hope you'll remember all this I could. my fourth one, which was a request. I'm really happy that your capacity building, the training bit. My only request is make these international. I saw the World Bank publishing, when they're having a training, they publish, so people are able to apply from all over. I got passionate about seaweed from a training opportunity I got with GIZ. So I would really love to attend some of these trainings and get to learn more. Thank you so much. My name is Mr. Oscar.
Thank you for your questions. I'm going to bring you the mic. I hope you remember them.
Thank you, Oscar. Yeah, I think the first question, how do we get Kenya? We are in Kenya. We have a big office in Mombasa. Actually, I'm also having a desk in the Mombasa office. And we're having a program in, I think, south or northwest coast of Kenya. We are doing, there is a pilot project in seaweed farming, but we are planning to expand it. So it was seaweed or also crab fattening. So we are in Kenya. My boss is also in Mombasa. We can give you contact as well, but I'll be coming, actually, last 2 weeks I was in Mombasa. Yeah, even this week I was supposed to be in Lamu for an event. So we are in Kenya, and we're expanding, well, the way we're expanding in Tanzania, but also expanding in Kenya. But there was more work in Tanzania, as you know. That's why today we focused, for the case of this workshop, to focus in Tanzania, where there is VVD examples. Yeah, and the second one was carbon credit. Yeah, I think it's in the process. Maybe my boss Adnan can talk a bit about it later when he gets the opportunity. But we are developing. It's still in the abstract stage that we want people to have more seaweed farmers so that we can move into that stage. Yeah. And yeah, the issue of farming in the deeper water, that is one of our main concern, but we're trying to look on the women, their ability to go there. It's also the issue of gender issue. We have to be very sensitive on now allowing women to go in the deeper water. So we need to have a lot of capacitating them, giving some boats, but they need to work with men so that they can help them to go there in deeper water. Yeah, that's the main concern. Also the quality, the issue of quality is under discussion also. Yeah, so I think we can connect and we can talk more about your concerns. And trainings, yeah, we'll talk also, because there's a time we'll be training in Kenya, in Mombasa, Lamu, all the coast of Kenya, north coast and south coast of Kenya. That's where I think you're doing. Where are you in Kenya? Yeah, so we have projects on that area, so we'll talk later. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Hando Waziri. I come from Tanzania, on one of the organization, Milele Zanzibar Foundation. It is a NGO, non-profit organization, and it is based in Zanzibar. Actually, I don't have questions to my brother Ayubu, but what I have some kind of point of addition, because he have presenting something which is similar on what we are doing, and we are so familiar. And TNC in Tanzania, we are one of the partner in Zanzibar. So my point, in addition to what he have presented based in challenges in Zanzibar, seaweed facing challenge, one of it, apart from those which Mr. Ayubu has explained, is the seed of the seaweed is so old, and based on some research, it seems that we have to introduce another seed. The seed now, it is about 30 years. So the plan of introducing seaweed tissue culture, it's so crucial in Zanzibar, and even the quality of seaweed nowadays is less. One of the factors is the seed, it's so old. So this is another challenge. The seed of seaweed in Zanzibar is so old. Another thing is climatic change. That is another challenge which is also facing seaweed in Zanzibar. And we as the Milele Zanzibar Foundation, we done one of the project we call Building Resilience for Seaweed Farmers. So that's project based on how we can make this seaweed farmer to adopt on the climatic change. And the proposed solution was to move to deep water seaweed farming. And the initiative have already started in Zanzibar, but still in this mitigation or moving to deep water seaweed farming is still facing with some kind of challenge, like as I was trying to introduce just a little, but the main is this deep water seaweed farming, it needs some equipment like boats. Also, seaweed farmers, especially these women, they have to know how to swim. And this is the main problem for women. They don't know how to swim, because moving from shallow water to deep water, so you have to be very aware on seaweed, sea safety, as well as having swimming skills, so that everything maybe can happen in the sea, you can even save yourself. So these women, they lack these skills. And we done a simple baseline survey. We found about 80% of these women, they don't know how to swim. So nowadays, currently we as the Milele, we want to have some small program of training this seaweed farmer how to swim. See? As to help them so that they can move better to this deep water seaweed farming. So these are main two challenges which I try to add, and because I'm so familiar with this seaweed farming in Zanzibar, and we also, as Milele, we are doing value additions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So again, highly localized solutions.
Thank you for that talk, Todd Capson, Parley for the Oceans. I was wondering if you could elaborate upon the value-added products that you produce or are hoping to produce in Zanzibar.
Yeah, currently there are soaps, and some oil, like cosmetics, but also there's some juice. There's some food products, but also the product that we are using. But the main ones are soaps, cosmetics, and some people are also producing some gel. There are groups I know that like a jam, seaweed jam. Yeah, so the main product, but the main challenge is to give the capacity to produce. They have to buy machines and some other ingredients so that they can finalize the produce. But there are a lot of entrepreneurships going on down there in Zanzibar and other parts of Tanzania.
Thank you for that question. So I think our next session after the intermission is actually going to deal with value add specifically. But do you want to expand on the question?
I was just curious if you have actually generated products and sold them, and if these markets exist, and if there are people that are making a living by producing them.
Yeah, as TNC, we don't produce. We're working with farmers, so we didn't have this time to organize the farmers to come produce products.
Okay, maybe to respond from what has been asked, yeah, he's from TNC, they are not making business. I'm never from Plant Biodefender. I'm an entrepreneur and we're working on that. So here we have two products made from seaweed. We have a gel that has antibacterial, antifungal that can be applied on board for control of the skin diseases. Is made from seaweed. We are based in northern part of Tanzania, but we are taking these seaweeds from Dar es Salaam and Zanzibar. We have another product that is a repellent for mosquito that is also made on seaweed. So you can see the market is expanding, and maybe we are going to collaborate and to see more opportunity because we are business people, then we can see this opportunity and innovate more product from seaweed. Yes, we have, and I have brought here for exhibition. I have two products from seaweed. I have not exported, but we are selling in Tanzania in the market. We wish it to expand more. We have registered in Tanzania.
Yeah, my name is Alice Mushi. I'm working with Milele Zanzibar Foundation with my colleague Muhando. Yeah, in value addition, we supported farmers, processors, like 300 processors on making different products. We invite the expert from Indonesia, came to Zanzibar, train them to make different products. From 2016 up to now, we managed to make like more than 15 products from cosmetics, soap, food processor, cookies, making from the seaweed. So now they are selling the product, they get their income, but we still have the issue of the finished product. Yes, we don't have, the market is there. We have local market and the tourist market. You know Zanzibar, we have the tourism market, but we didn't yet feed the market because of the product, the poor product. So we are now as Milele, train them to make the product which will penetrate the tourism market.
Hi, I'm Wangare Deuri from Wani Blue, and just to emphasize, the farmers at Kibuyuni are making the final product. They have a 6 line of different produce. They do have a market. Actually, this product, we were supposed to come and exhibit during the conference. Unfortunately, when I just made a post on social media, we sold all the products. So there is a market. The issue is awareness. Because awareness, yes, because they're producing in a small rural village. Yes, in Kwale County. But the urban market are willing to pay a premium to use products that are made of seaweed and coconut oil. And that's what the Kibuni farmers are doing. Unfortunately, there's a mismatch because those ones in urban areas, I got to know about seaweed last year. They don't know the products exist. And that's why Money Blue is here, to raise awareness about these products and what they can do for your skin and what you can do for the seaweed farmers in Kibuni. Thank you.
Smells very nice.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Fatima Mangena from Tanzania Healthy Seaweed Company. I just have one question for you. You explained that you have developed a guide for the seaweed farmers and processors. I just want to know, have you shared that manual guide? Because when it comes from the seaweed processors, it's very crucial, especially for the food processors. So I just wanted to know, have you shared with them to see the guidelines?
And I think that's a good question in terms of the training and the guides, that have come out of Tanzania.
Yeah, the guide is the guide is there. I'll need to cross-check with my colleagues on how we can. So maybe if I can get a piece of paper, people write their emails, then we know how we can share with it later.
How does spell SMIDA? Okay. It's a SMIDA, yeah?
This is Mr. Oscar again. I like challenging status quo. And, we are painting a good picture that we are making beauty products and soaps and all that, yeah? But where is the money? Where is the money? If you look at Tanzania's seaweed, most of it is exported. Yeah, most of it is exported. Where is it exported to? And where they export to, what do they make? The money is in Karajina and it's not in these beauty products. Yes, they are making the soaps and all that. And I like the model. It's a model we are adopting in Kenya. The Zaski, the Dr. Msuya's organization, she's on incorporated government and the farmers, and it's a three-phase kind of a thing, and academia. So the government forces, say, the hotels to buy the products, a certain percentage to buy the products. So the farmers get something. But whatever they're getting is small. There's so much potential if we can get some of these industries into the continent and do something, yeah? When I started making a lot of noise in Kenya, one of the Kemfree guys, he told me, I will support you if we are not going to export this seaweed, if we are going to process it here. And that is a challenge I have. So I challenge my brothers and sisters in Tanzania to go the extra mile to the next level. Thank you.
Any more questions, comments? Adnan, should I hand over to you then?
I think, this is really a useful discussion, but it'd be also really interesting to now see if we can channel some of that lesson towards the value chains that have been built and are still growing in Tanzania in terms of recommendations for South Africa. We're dealing with different types of seaweed here, largely kelp, and maybe it's a good time to hear from Professor Bolton about the background on South Africa, and then we can converge the two conversations.
Okay, yeah, I agree, Adnan. Hello, I'm John Bolton. I'm Emeritus Professor at the University of Cape Town. Not just South Africa, but I think broaden it in general. That's the way I've been rewriting my talk every couple of seconds in my head here. But I think it's right that we started in Tanzania, because that's the big success story. Flower Msuya and I wrote the South African part. We wrote a paper in 2021 about seaweed aquaculture in Africa. And I think it's 83% of it is Eucuma and Capophycus in Tanzania, what we've been talking about. And that's the big success story. And as far as seaweeds go in general, the two big historical uses are jellies, colloids, carrageenan, agar, alginate from brown algae, and human food. particularly in Asia, Japan. We all know, if you go in a sushi bar, the little black stuff around the rice is nori. That's a cooler water thing mostly, so it would have to be somewhere cool. So I think that's the big point. The Eucuma they grow in Tanzania is a tropical seaweed. It grows in 25 degrees and up. It can grow a little bit less. So trying to grow it in South Africa would be very difficult. South Africa and Namibia, we have a temperate Southern Africa, cooler water, and we have different seaweeds. So we have the carrageenan industry. Almost all the seaweed grown in the world, 97% of it, is grown in Asia. So even though Tanzania is a huge example for Africa, it's only Africa's production, I think, is 0.8% of the world's production, and nearly all of it's in Tanzania. So it's one wonderful example that we've got. And certainly the value, I've known Flower Msuya for many, many years, and the value adding is quite a new thing that we've just been talking. I think you'll agree with that. You know, that the industry was based for many years on selling dry seaweed for carrageenan, which is a very important thing, I think. So the other possibilities are Gracilaria, which is a different red seaweed. Different species grow in cooler waters or in warmer waters. But most of the industry, I think, is mostly in cooler waters, Chile and various places. There was a small aquaculture production, in fact, it was outside Tanzania, the only place, of Gracilaria in Namibia for a few years, about 20 years ago, but it didn't prove economic. Now there's quite a good industry developing in Morocco, in North Africa, and there are companies from Morocco been looking around Africa to grow Gracilaria. We can also grow it in Saldanha Bay. Is Simon still here? Simon from the UNDP has a project linked with the Japanese that's looking towards growing Gracilaria locally in South Africa. But what we have in South Africa are very large brown seaweeds. And they grow in temperate waters. They don't grow in warm tropical waters. And the only places in Africa where there are kelp forests, we call them forests because they're like big trees. The biggest ones in South Africa, 17 meters. If you go into the aquarium downstairs, you'll see some big kelps. Walk past the kelp tank if you get a chance, if you haven't been already. They're only in temperate waters. There's a little bit in Morocco, which actually might have trouble with climate change because the water's warming up. But the big kelp forests in Africa are in South Africa and Namibia, the west coast where we get cool water with lots of nutrients coming up. So it's a wonderful place for growing kelps, perhaps one of the best in the world, because we have lots of sunshine and lots of nutrients, lots of nitrogen upwelling from the Benguela system. So there are actually two projects which have started in the last couple of years thinking about growing kelps. Nobody's ever grown kelp commercially in Africa before. Of the world's seaweed production, about 42% of it is two kelp species. The Japanese sugar kelp, most of it's in China, but also Korea, Japan, mostly. The Japanese sugar kelp, which has a relative in the North Atlantic, European sugar kelp, which lots of people are trying to grow in the North Atlantic at the moment, in Norway and Scotland, and Canada, various other places. And wakame, which if you go to a Japanese, these are Japanese names. We also, miso soup has wakame in it in a Japanese restaurant. That's a very tasty seaweed, and that makes up the rest of the amount. So nearly half, 42% of world seaweed aquaculture production is those two kelps grown in cooler waters in China and other parts of Asia. So the two projects, we are trying to, normally, seaweed aquaculture takes place in sheltered waters, okay? In Tanzania, you pick a bay and there aren't big, you've got coral reefs, so you haven't got these big waves crashing in which will break up your system. And we don't, South Africa, if you look at the map, has an incredibly straight coastline, so we don't have much sheltered water space to carry out that sort of aquaculture. So Saldanha Bay on the west coast is the logical place to try it, and that's where we're doing it. We have 3 west coast kelp species that we're going to try all of them to start with. And so far, we've just done a literature survey, pre-feasibility study, looked at the economics of the possibility, and it seems like it might work. And now we're just starting. We've built two. We put together, with the help of industry. This is a joint project between fisheries and industry and a bit of academia and that sort of thing. So we're trying to start seeing how we can go with kelp aquaculture in Saldanha Bay. The other project is also very interesting. This is in Namibia, and it started a couple of years ago. They put their first seaweeds in last year, and this is kelp blue. I don't know if any of you have heard of kelp blue. The idea originally came from meetings of people interested. We heard from our Tanzanian delegate, about taking up nutrients, all the benefits of growing seaweeds from an ecosystem point of view, taking up nutrients, seaweeds photosynthesize, reducing ocean acidification, possible carbon capture. I'll make my comments about sequestration later. And, you know, there are all sorts of benefits of cleaning up systems with seaweeds. So they thought, we want to grow a huge amount of seaweed to try and make an impact on a world scale. Where's the best place to do it? And the CEO, Daniel Hooft, came to a meeting in Namibia a couple of years ago and decided that Namibia was a good place to start. So they're running a pilot project. They're growing giant kelp, Macrocystis, which has just started in Namibia. So now we have two projects, one in South Africa, one in Namibia, both looking towards growing large brown seaweeds. Just finally, I want to say something about value addition. It's quite funny. I might just say a personal anecdote. I'm supposed to be at the International Seaweed Symposium in Tasmania at the moment, giving a talk about South African seaweed aquaculture, but I decided it was too far away and too expensive, so I'm giving it to you instead in 5 minutes. Yeah, so the South African seaweed industry has been, it's only small, it's about, I don't know, 10,000 or so tons a year, but it's long, since the 1950s at least. And it's been based around kelp mostly. Now it's almost all of kelp. And traditionally it was collecting washed up kelp, drying it, and shipping it overseas for jellies, this, similar to the carrageenan, alginate in this case. But that's busy dying out at the moment. I'm not quite sure why, but certainly the price of it has a lot to do with it. But what, in the 1990s, what developed on land is an aquaculture, land-based industry based on a shellfish, the abalone, which is worth a lot of money in the Chinese market, the Asian market. So now there are lots of abalone farms which, when they started, wanted a lot of seaweed to feed to their abalone. So a lot of the kelp that's used in South Africa now, more than half of it, is used as feed for abalone in land-based farms. They pump seawater onto land, grow the abalone and feed, formulated feed, but also kelp. On those farms has developed, some farmers didn't have kelp, and they started growing seaweed themselves in the effluent from the abalone. In fact, a green seaweed, don't know if you know sea lettuce, ulva, and now South Africa grows about 2,000 tons of ulva on abalone farms as feed for abalone, and also as to enable recirculation to clean up the water, take out the ammonia, to enable partial recirculation of the water, which saves a lot of pumping costs. So it's a very good example of integrated aquaculture of different species from different levels of the food chain, which we've been hearing about. And I'm part of a EU project, Astral, which is about integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, which is this sort of thing. So that's a South African example. But as far as value adding, the biggest thing that's happened with kelp in South Africa, it started in the 1970s, but it's busy developing now, is for agricultural biostimulants, which is basically kelp juice, which is sprayed onto crops to make, it's not fertilizer, it's not full of nitrogen and phosphorus, it's full of hormones, which are the same as plant hormones and make the plants produce better roots and take up more minerals and grow better. And there's lots of research on that. The first one was in the 1970s already, Kelp Products, which is in Simonstown, quite close to here. But now there are, I think, 4 companies in South Africa making agricultural biostimulants from kelps. So that's our little success story of, and they're very successful at exporting of value adding. Is there anything else? Well, I'm here anyway. If you've got anything more, you... Yeah. Well, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's not declining as it is in most places. And in 2006 or 7, it jumped 70 kilometers. And I've just heard it's got another few kilometers, another 30 kilometers as well. So what's happening here is, with climate change, what's happening is the wind's picking up on average overall, and it's a wind-driven upwelling system. So because there's more wind, on average, the water temperature actually cooler, not warmer. That's what we think anyway. But yeah, so the kelps seem to be doing all right at the moment here.
I was going to ask you a question earlier, but then I think you answered it towards the end.
Okay.
About the commercial viability of products derived from Maclonia compared to the other ones that are already making money. You mentioned the two big kelp species that are generating, what, 42% of the revenue.
Yeah.
I was wondering how Maclonia fit into that market, but I think you might have answered that.
Well, I think, yeah, I'll comment on it because China, a lot of what they used to grow, the sugar kelp, used to go for alginate. And now the industry's changed, and now they're eating a lot more of it. And a lot of it now is, in fact, like our kelp for abalone feed, is going in the aquafeed industry to replace, fish meal and all this sort of... kelp doesn't have a lot of protein. Oh, I just wanted to mention, just briefly, one other thing. Biorefinery is a big word with sea. I'm sure in Tasmania, everybody's talking out of it. In other words, getting more than one product out of your seaweed. So, for example, if you squeeze the seaweed and get the juice out, and you sell that as a biostimulant, what's left? And it's got carbohydrates in, which is alginate. There might be protein left in it if you can get it out. There is minerals in it which you can use for nutritive low-sodium salt. So the idea is to get 4 or 5 products from the same material, which is the way, certainly the way the Chinese are thinking with their seaweed products. Dave?
So maybe it's a trade secret, but what do you use for substrate for growing the kelp in Saldanha Bay?
Yeah, no, it's not a secret, actually. We haven't got any secrets. We're funding by UK aid. I should have said that. The funding at the moment comes from UK aid through the Bivalve Aquaculture Association of South Africa, BASASA. So there's nothing secret. No, we were trying to grow. What you do is you have a sort of PVC roll, and then you wrap nylon string around it, and then you seed the spores onto this nylon string, and then you grow it. You need a hatchery it takes about 6 weeks or so to grow these little baby kelps. And then you take the string and you tie it onto a rope in the bay, fasten it on. But what we've just learned recently from Kelp Blue, actually, at the PSSA meeting where you were as well, is that ordinary nylon string's too smooth. We were having a bit of trouble. And they buy specific, people now in Europe make seaweed twine to grow seaweeds on. And it's rougher. So these little tricks are things you need to know if you're going to... One thing about this, all these things, if you're growing a new product, when they started growing abalone in South Africa, it took 10 years before you started making any money. So don't think it's going to happen quickly. Yeah, it might do if we're lucky, but... Yeah?
Thank you. Fascinating discussion. I have a question around the integration of sort of lab-based precision agricultural technologies for seaweed farming. So are you experimenting with machine learning, artificial intelligence, robotics, underwater drones, some type of sensors, monitoring to optimize your harvest?
In Europe, there's certain Norwegians, obviously, places where labor is expensive. They don't want to be having divers measuring things, and so all aquaculture in countries where there's money to do it. I saw one the other day feeding fish by measuring the kelp, how much they move, and with artificial intelligence. And our EU project's full of it. So I think if you can afford to do it, you do it. Whereas if you want to feed communities, you might be better off with having people doing things themselves. So one has to find a balance. These things always.
So there's none of that happening locally?
Locally, well, only in our EU project we're testing equipment for various things, biological monitors for conditions, and that's got artificial intelligence. So it's all if it's funded from outside maybe, but not locally otherwise, I don't think. You had a question at the back? Oh, great. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Training for entrepreneurs. Oh, that's a good idea, yeah. There are a number around, international possibilities. Lizette just mentioned Green Wave, which is an American, and there are online courses, for example, for growing kelps. They're particularly a kelp group, and it's free, yeah. I'm not so sure about Ucuma, whether there are, training in these sort of things online. There are, of course I know most about kelp, that's the trouble, but in Scotland, the Scottish Social and Marine Science also run courses in the seaweed industry, not just growing, but also other aspects of it. Yeah, but I say these things are a bit different. I mean, if you're going to grow different things, probably. What you're saying about being localized, my comment would be that the general principle is not localized. They're looking for value adding, having small entrepreneurs and all that. I was listening to Tanzania, and that's sort of what's happening in South Africa too. There are little cosmetic companies cropping up, and I've met, I can't remember her name, there's a lady who makes kelp burgers in Maine, who's in the east coast of North America, whose husband runs an ice cream parlor in Cape Town. And I had coffee with her recently. So there are people all over the world looking for new use, particularly with this move towards vegetarianism. We're moving towards using the sea for food, and we want to stop eating so many animals. So what's the logical thing is to grow seaweed. No?
So you said the conditions here are pretty good at this coastline, right? And you got sold on a day. My question is, if this trial goes well, what's the potential of that industry within South Africa? Like, how much can you scale it given the natural conditions here?
It's a good question. And I forgot to mention that kelp blue is aiming offshore. And that's what's happening in the North Atlantic now. They're talking about engineering. The kelp blue wants to grow Microcystis giant kelp at 15 meters and make a permanent artificial kelp forest that grows up to the surface and then harvest the top, as they used to do in California with a barge. So that's a slightly different thing. And I think in South Africa, there are a few other little places one could. But if you're going to do it on a very large scale, we might also have to move offshore.
Because it grows very fast, right? You can get up to 0.5 meters per day.
Well, that's the famous maximum figure for California. I always say to the, seaweeds, biologists measure growth of plant. I'm a botanist, in percent per day. And if you're 50 meters long, 50 centimeters a day isn't very much, percent per day. We used to have gracilaria growing 6, 7, 8% a day, which is actually a lot more, but people don't think like that. Oh, good. Yeah. Sequestration. Okay, I'll give you my perspectives quick. Seaweeds, in my general sense, are plants, things that photosynthesize. So they fix carbon. So you can measure how much they fix. When they grow, they take up CO2 from the water, which presumably will be replaced from the atmosphere eventually. So they're carbon fixers. But if you define sequestration as storing away for a long time, people say 100 years, they don't have, like trees, Obviously, the trees have to sit there for 100 years for it to be worth it. So there's two ways of doing it with seaweeds. One is, if you're going to build, as Kelp Blue want to do, 7,000 hectares of kelp forest that's there in perpetuity, even if the plants change, you will still have a permanent biomass having carbon, just as you have on land with a forest. But the other way, which people more talk about, is what happens to the carbon afterwards. Obviously, if you harvest it and use it, you know, if you eat it, and the human being respires, then the carbon's back in the atmosphere again. So it could get nearer to carbon neutrality, but you're not going to sequester carbon. But kelps give out carbon all the time, as well as taking it up. They give out dissolved carbon and particulate carbon. And a kelp forest loses a lot of material. And the kelps only live a few years, so bits will fall off and a storm will take half of it away. And some of that will sink, and also some of that will go into the bacterial ecosystem, bacterial loop, and then be eaten by other things, and some of that will sink. And the question is how much, so in other words, my answer is kelp forests, or seaweeds, sequester carbon, but we don't know how much. And it's very difficult to calculate. So that's going to be, to me, the tricky part of making carbon credits is how are you going to work it out, I think. And how do you prove it? Because there's no soil. I mean, that's the difference with trees is in the tree, and mangroves, it's in the soil. My other thing with mangroves and seagrass is, can you keep adding carbon to, if you've already got a mangrove, or do you have to grow a new mangrove swamp? That's anyway. Andrea?
No, I'm not an expert around carbon credits, but I had a discussion with someone about this recently. So there's obviously what you spoke about, the actual carbon sequestration. The other side would be what products are you producing and what is it replacing?
Yeah.
So if the kelp is replacing biofuel, for example.
Bioplastic, for example.
Or plastic. Then it would be looking at the comparison of what the same amount of plastic damage would do versus that. So there seems to be that element to it. So
Yeah, that can't reduce the carbon. It can only stop increasing it.
The way, so this is what I kind of understand, but I really am not. So they look at it from two aspects. Like there's the scientific capture of the carbon, but then there's also that kind of replacement value. So if you're using seaweed for biofuels, what would the same amount of fuel cost in terms of carbon if it was normal fuel? Or how much land would it use, or, depending on your product. So, if another product would clear 2 hectares of natural vegetation to produce versus seaweed that wouldn't do that, so it's almost like it's not an actual carbon capture, but it's avoiding.
No, it's definitely carbon capture.
Yeah, it's avoiding the loss somewhere else, if that makes sense.
It's the word sequestration is the problem, I think. Because it's not sequestration, it's replacement, as you say.
So it's a loss avoidance versus an actual gain. So it's not, you don't have to plant trees, but if you protect the forest, it's also calculated in there somehow. That's as much as I'm.
And from the seed point of view, the carbon's easy to work out. We know the carbon content of eucuma or kelp or whatever, just multiply up. One more question? No? Yeah.
Is this greenwashing, or these claims they're based on scientific rigor?
There's a very good paper you should look at by Barry Costa-Pierce and Chopin about hype and aquaculture that has a section about seaweed in that's worth reading. But you're right, the question is that I'm on the advisory board of a thing called the Sustainable Seaweed Coalition, which is, I think it's now linked to the UN. The idea is to try and build the seaweed revolution in a sustainable way. I mean, that's the important thing, not to go overboard. But on the other hand, what we want to do is, if there's a wave of moving towards using seaweeds, we want to catch the wave. We don't want to be left behind. So my feeling is that, you know, there has to be hype in everything, but we must be careful, and we must make sure that we, ocean acidification is another one. If you're right in the middle of a kelp bed, then you're better off for ocean acidification, because in the day when the kelp bed photosynthesizes, it'll raise the pH. But if you're further out, it's quite hard to imagine how it'll work in an aquaculture sense. It works on our abalone farms with the ulva and the abalone system, but to do it out in the sea sounds a bit... So it's easy to say, you know, seaweeds will help ocean acidification, but the actual practical, you know, how you go about it needs some thinking. So I think we need to keep talking, and we need to be careful of the hype. Well, you see, nearly all seaweed aquaculture was in Asia until, well, even now. So Europe's just writing rules about things, you know, how much of this is, how much, you know, iodine or arsenic is allowed in kelp. They don't have, you know, the rules are out of date for when people didn't eat seaweed. So you have to start rethinking things like this if you're going to make it happen. That's my feeling anyway. Yeah, I mean, some of my older, you know, I've got grey hair here, some of my colleagues the same age as me, one of them's Thierry Chopin, worries that we did this in the 70s, in the oil crisis, and there was a big move, especially in the United States, towards growing lots of seaweed to solve the oil crisis, and it all went flat. And he remembers that, and he's worried about it happening again. So I think we've got to make sure that it doesn't. But to me, it feels a lot different. We didn't have meetings like this then. You know, things have moved on since then, and we're talking about eating them, not making biofuel out of them only. Yeah, so I think we'll see.
Two more questions, then we need to take an intermission.
Okay.
Well, I actually had a question. I didn't catch your name here. I think it was maybe a question for everyone, you know, in terms of other African countries and stuff. Why is alternate not, you know, why is there's this export instead of local production of alternate? Is there a reason for it? Is it an economy of scale? You know, what are the economic reasons around it? Is it not enough support, or does it not make financial sense? It was a bit of a general question, but we can take it later.
Well, I can comment on that because I've been going to International Seaweed Symposia for a long time. There was a very big international keeping it to themselves for a long time of, should I mention them? Copenhagen Pectin, FMC in North America, with carrageenan, for example. And the Philippines had a big battle with them about 20 years ago to try and make semi-purified carrageenan in the Philippines. So it's a global industry where they mix and match for different uses of jellies. So there's a sense in which you need an awful lot of seaweed to make it worthwhile. And certainly in Asia now they do. Whether even the amounts in Tanzania, I don't think that, I mean, they don't process carrageenan in Tanzania to my knowledge. So, I mean, you know, you would only have one sort, or two sorts, Eucuma and Capophycus. So, you know, they mix and match different seaweeds from different places. So, at the moment, it's still a big global industry, I would say. And you need an awful lot of seaweed to make it worthwhile. Unless you're making a high-priced product. We heard, Andre, you were there, we had a scientific conference where we had biotechnologists talking about high-price alginate products and fucoid and, you know, nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals. Then you start processing. Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned the Safe Seaweed Coalition, but they put out calls for funding as well, and I believe there's one in March, April. And in the past, I think they've been, I'm trying to think, is it 50,000 euros or something? But they have very specific calls, and safety was certainly on the last one, you know, to measure various things in seaweeds. And they're international. They like to spread the money around. So the SSC, Sustainable Seaweed Coalition, is worth looking up the website.
So thank you to Professor Bolton for that. I think they would have kept you here all day if they could. So we're going to take a very quick intermission. I think we're very much past that information. I think maybe just about 15 minutes, if you want. I'm not outside. I think we'd need to go back into the main venue.
Yeah, I just wanted to plant some seeds before we break, just so people have something to be thinking about. Thanks very much, Professor Bolton, and to all that have provided information so far. You know, I think just when we come back, if we can start to bring together, you know, some input from the group. I think we might lean on you again for some local information. We might lean on the East African examples a little bit as well. There seem to be about 3 areas in my mind that we can consolidate information in. You know, one of them is, what information are we still missing? And you know, I think that can help NGOs, that can help other players formulate the types of input that we can, and support that we can provide and start to steer in our programs. And another is, which sectors need to be at the table? And you know, we're talking about a series of potential workshops going forward to support you know, really flushing out some of these responses, and ultimately a blueprint or a roadmap to establishing some value chains. So what sectors need to be at the table? What roles can they play? So that we can start to have those communications, make sure the right people are showing up for these interventions. And then the third thing would be, while it might be limited given the high energy coastline that South Africa has, and the whole Benguela really going right up to southern Angola, where do we start to identify pilot initiatives, and what does it take to engage communities? What do the communities need to do to start to benefit from that engagement? If we're talking about actual monetization of opportunity being quite a ways off, how can some of those sectors that we've identified start to build that out in a way that engages the communities meaningfully? So I think those are some of the questions that, for me at least, start to emerge. I'd like to hope that when we come back we can put Lisette more in the middle, because I've known Lisette for 20 odd years, and she has a wealth of information on the sector. I don't. So, and I think Sienna also can sit front and center, and we can start to leverage some of that expertise in the room. But yeah, thanks. Again, I don't know if there's coffee available close by, but it sounds like we might have to go all the way back to the other side to get it. But please, let's try to be back, in 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah?
Bring the coffee back.
Yeah. Sprint back.
hata tulipopata tumepata for 2 days, kesho ni kuana au kuja ukatafute sehemu nyingine. Hiyo siku ya tatu wamesema wacha tufike huko tukaangalia.
So thank you, everyone. I think we're just going to kick off our last session. I think we don't have too much time. I think we're actually meant to wrap up at 5, which gives us about 20 minutes. Very interesting conversations. I think we're all very interested and invested in the conversations. So we're going to kick off, and I think maybe just wrapping up with those 3 questions, Adnan, that you posed to us. I know, Lizette, you were making notes of those questions. Were you? I saw you writing. My scribe was also doing so. Yeah. Yeah. So I think if we've got, I don't think we've got everybody in the room, but I think we can kick off. So just want to recap on those last 3 questions from Adnan. Right. So we're looking at what information are we missing? What is it that we need academia to research for us? We need NGOs to look into. What is it that we are missing? Professor.
I read an article recently that said it's a chicken and egg situation. In that what we need is more production. And in order to make that production, we need uses and a value chain. And these things are sort of happening together. And that balance is quite difficult. Because, you can't make the uses unless you've got the material. You can't make the material unless you've got the reason to grow it. And there's this sort of chicken and
egg. Yeah.
More money seems to be going into the value chain than into the production. That's what the article said.
Okay. You also have a... Yeah. I think the point that he's making is that we probably have up until now been relying on, say, Namibia to connect, or Saldanha to connect with Namibia, or someone to connect with Tanzania to learn. But what kind of process can we put in place that is inclusive and where everyone is free to participate, where we are actually sharing learning and communicating all the time, and you're not each one on your own in the journey?
I'm not sure if that's what actually constitutes a community of practice. I'm wondering if that's the type of thing we're talking about, emerging from this. Yeah, I mean, there's already the suggestion that Lizette and others will be leading a series of workshops, and these need to be focused and more targeted. But maybe that, because the idea is for that to be as inclusive as possible, but how do you create that inclusivity without some level of information dissemination and engagement? So I think perhaps an early low-hanging fruit would be to have an effort to establish an open platform for that type of communication.
Yeah.
I've been getting questions about ongoing training opportunities or connection to tools. I think that's the type of thing that can flow more naturally through that.
Yeah. Do we want to identify a key stakeholder that can run with it here, or do we not? No?
Well, I think we can note that down as a take-home from this,
Yeah.
right? What's going to happen to the notes from this workshop is yet to be seen. That'll certainly feed into the next workshop. But us as TNC, we sponsored this event because we wanted to be part of the conversation for how a priority region, in this case South Africa, learns from the sort of cumulative knowledge that's being shared and comes together at an event like this. So we'll certainly take some ownership over the outcomes from this workshop, and I think that could dovetail into maybe taking the lead on developing some sort of an initiative, not necessarily running it in the long term, but at least helping carry it.
I think from Ernst & Young's side, so I am the partner that leads public sector for Ernst & Young. So I think we certainly can commit to partner with you and see how we can facilitate helping you to set up that community of practice in some way.
I also from the ASC side, we could contribute training and support to that as well.
Great. And our next question was, which sectors need to be at the table? Who are we missing? Yeah. So, Professor, I don't know if you want to take up that. Start a podcast or all of that. We'll maybe, as part of the community of practice, have a regular podcast from you. But I think that is a very valuable comment, is that the people on the ground, the farmers, the communities, certainly need a seat at the table.
Specific to the coastline, our coastline is dominated by mining houses, and so I think to make sea space available, the mining houses need to be at the table so that more space is available for these farming practices to actually occur, because I mean they have large spaces, they need to practice rehabilitation to the coastline that they are obviously degrading. So I think that they need to be really present at such engagements.
What about policymakers? How active are they? I'm asking the question because how challenging.
I think they are through the pre-feasibility study. Yeah, Andrea was at the backs from DFFE, from the mariculture section. So I think there are links with policy. Our feeling from our EU project is that in South Africa, the aquaculture industry sector and the government and academia work quite well together.
Already.
Our Europeans are quite surprised at how we work together.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Because there aren't too many either.
Yeah.
We all know each other.
John, maybe it's worth mentioning that with our process going forward, we have been very aware of the fact that we need to be inclusive, and we have already identified 6 constituencies from which we do our invites. And it is government, well, it's not part of the micro document, but it's government, and it's academia, it's the industry themselves, it's the concessionaires, the farming, the guys that's farming already, regardless of what they farm. I'm missing one.
The local community.
And the local community. So we've now recently, Benedict's drawn up a stakeholder map for us so that we can see them all on the page. So every time we do a workshop, we look at all of those constituencies and the invites go to all that they can. I think we can invest that so, you know, that the invoices do reach
Communication.
Invites do reach. Sorry, it's in my mind. In talking invoices, the invites do go to the correct constituencies, and so that we don't intend or unintentionally leave people out.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask both of you, what's the role of provincial government in your experience so far versus DFFE?
We've got them down as government, so the government constituency is national, provincial, municipal, and and we've got those names down, and then the, you know, obviously the constituency will come, and then we send the invites to them, and then it's up to them to attend or not to attend.
We have to mention, I mean, it's on our list, I'm not sure where, companies that make food, that sell food, Woolworths.
Yeah.
We've even got them on.
They are on, yeah, but they're important.
Because they open the market.
Nutrition and
Yeah.
the market, and if you're growing fish, that's who you want to sell it to.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what the value from the community of practice will be is that this stakeholder map will continue to grow through the community of practice.
And just a question, sorry, for the licensing, is the regional government involved, or is it the national? Andrea's back.
yay or nay because it's a common space, common good, so it can't be a first come, first serve. It would need to go through some kind of open process. So that's the one side. The marine aquaculture right is fairly simple. It's a 30-day process. As long as you've met the criteria, it's fine. And then the other aspect is obviously your environmental authorization. So we've done some aquaculture zones, which then include seaweed within them. So there you would have a plug and play model. But outside of them, you would need to do your own EIA, or one would need to do a bigger zone once you've identified those areas.
So just have two more questions, yeah? Yeah, so I mean, I don't know what the possibility is of a regional body doing that. You might have some challenges there, but I mean, it's something that's possibly worth considering. I just wanted to know how well is the process really well documented? How difficult? Are there a lot of bottlenecks? Maybe for another day, a conversation for another day. Oh, sorry, just here quickly first.
I think just to clarify that, that's the difference between the marine and freshwater aquaculture. So marine aquaculture sits squarely under our fisheries branch, under the Marine Living Resource Act. Freshwater aquaculture, you're right, is somewhere, sometimes under provincial agriculture, provincial environmental affairs. It changes from province to province. And it's not regulated under one piece of legislation, which is something we're also trying to do with the bill, is to include freshwater and marine and house it in one, so that it's clearer and helps streamline the authorization processes, etc. But we kind of need a vehicle for that to move in.
Yeah.
So, but you're right, but the difference is freshwater and marine.
Okay, so you had a question?
I have a question for John. Given that, for example, plenty of forests are expanding eastward to kelp growth at 40 centimeters or so per day, or some sort of, or I'd say that with the caveat of what you mentioned earlier. If one is to expand the market for value-added products from kelp, for example, like kelp patches produced and such, do you think that the long-term vision could be met by kelp harvested from the wild, just naturally growing, or will that ultimately require some sort of aquaculture facility?
The coastline split up into concession areas, and there are concessionaires who are allowed to use kelp in each individual area. And there's a limit to how much that is a quota based on the biomass, estimates of the biomass. And some of them, we came in 2006, I don't know how everybody looked since, but some of them were already getting close to the limit. So there's certainly a limit there. You know, in my opinion, you don't want to keep increasing harvesting the rivers and the environment, and they're certainly kept very strictly.
So it sounds like you think aquaculture is going to be required.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
The things are going to happen that we talk about with the seaweed revolution, and then we're going to need more material.
Yeah.
And certainly we mentioned it at the PSSA meeting to these industries, to the chemical engineers, and they said thousands of tons we need
Yeah.
to make this industry work.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way. I have a quick comment
let's just move on to our last question quickly. Where do we start? Identifying some pilot initiatives. You put the question there.
Well, I put the question there because, you know, we're largely talking about kelp for South Africa. And, you know that's already geographically restricted. And as TNC, we've already got an interest in certain communities in South Africa, Namibia, and Angola, supporting value chains around small-scale fisheries as well as aquaculture opportunities. So that would actually dovetail this conversation as to how we can put some resources into supporting particular pilot projects. But we want that to be part of the strategic discussion going forward.
Identifying the pilot projects.
And you know, in South Africa, we've already identified Honduplipai as a community that's been already quite resource stressed and in need of some support. And it's also been interesting to hear about some of the opportunities in Namibia that, you know, and the industry that was sputtering and disappearing, and maybe learn some lessons as to why and what type of support we're talking about that would bridge, you know, that period that we need to be able to pursue the model. So I think that's a lot to unpack now, but if there are already thoughts that can be carried over into next week's workshop and the subsequent workshops, and help us narrow down some, not just the location for pilot opportunities, but what we're talking about when we say pilot opportunity for a particular community.
I think what I keep hearing is the importance of this community of practice to provide support, regional support and support in the continent. It keeps coming through. You know, some of us are more mature than others. Some of us have better regulatory environment that makes it easier for us, and others not. So I see that community of practice actually becoming very key in getting more production going. And I know you're talking about a next workshop, and maybe you just want to indicate, you know, when that workshop is going to be and how it will be communicated as a next step to this session.
I didn't go, I just need to put it in context. Our project, like I said in the beginning, is South Africa kelp farming, so it's focused on South Africa. So our role, I don't think, John, as far as I know, can go further than that. So anything further than that will have to fall on your shoulders, and then we can work together. If we put a roadmap in place, we can say, right, this is what I can do within my scope and with the funding that I have. Focus on the South African component. Maybe we can try something equal to that, but in other regions. So we could jockey together, but identify what falls into my ambit and what falls into yours. Not mine, yours, but you know.
Also, there's UNDP plus areas.
And that also.
So we have taken the attendance register. Not all, so maybe if you haven't, maybe just before you leave, find one of our scribes to give your details to, so that we can actually send out a communication to everyone that was here, and hopefully then start off the conversation around how you take this discussion further and how you establish what is clearly a priority, a community of practice for seaweed, for sustainable seaweed.
Maybe I'm David Walker, and if I may just give a plug for some of the human resources side of this, just to say I'm and my colleague Courtney Badua are at Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and we do training
interns.
As interns to get part of the work placement, and they learn and they become cheap labor at the end of it. So just an opportunity.
I challenge you, in addition to giving us out the list, you have to create a group, if you can, a Telegram group, chairperson will be committed to it. We have a mailing group, yeah, and maybe that would be helpful.
Okay, challenge accepted. So I don't know, I think that kind of concludes it from my side. I just have to say on behalf of EY, I think we are extremely proud to be part of this conference. We are not specialists in anything that you do. And it certainly is inspiring and very encouraging for me personally, the conversations that have taken place here. I think I go home today and I'm going to sleep a little bit better, knowing that there are people like you out there. But really very inspired by the conversation, very grateful to have met you and to have had the opportunity to listen to your talk. So thank you very much, Adnan, for giving us the opportunity to participate. And I certainly will, from EY's side, commit to support further initiatives. I want to thank Adnan and Lizette and Professor Baltman and all of you for attending and for your contributions, and wishing you lots of success in a road and a journey that I know is going to be a long one, but I think it's one that, with a coalition of the willing, which you seem to be, is very doable. We have to believe that. Thank you very much.